Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. We're back with another in context. We decided today we're going to talk about the rebellion in Sweida and Syria. What are Israelis' plans? What are the US's plans? Maybe they match, maybe they don't, for the greater Middle East and why they're doing this. Today is July 27th, 2025.
Thank you. I'd like to report the good news first. Up to schedule. I have had my weekly denial of a peace deal in between Israel and Syria done already, and I have my weekly denial of an Israeli attempt to invade Damascus done as well. So up to schedule.
Hmm.
As usual, I have to weekly remind those who take their news from Israeli media that these are rumors. And those who take the echo of these Israeli media rumors in Hezbollah media, that these are lies as well. I think it's getting old and people should stop doing that. Anyway, so let's get back to the rebellion in Sweida. So first, I think we need to put the international context in perspective. Officially, the US says that it's interested in a stable Syria. And it has made a lot of welcoming noises. And a lot of people believe in this. And they make the facetious claim that the reason for this is Saudi interference because Saudi Arabia would like to stick it to Iran. This is complete superficial nonsense. First, yes, the US has made concessions in Syria, but these concessions are mainly due to Turkish pressure. Turkey carries much more weight internationally than Saudi Arabia will ever do. The business of, well, Mohammed Salman bribed Trump into doing this is complete nonsense. Trump takes his bribe and turns around and does whatever he wants to do. So stop this childish nonsense. In addition, Mohammed Salman has no interest in anything good. Yes, he is making very nice noises about Syria, but all what he's after is something like he's after into Lebanon to gain influence that he can turn around and biddle in his Zionist plans with Israel or in his subservient relationships with the US. So stop listening to the Saudi media, please. So all of that aside, let's talk now about the context. The US is interested in bringing its active colonial presence in Syria to not an end, to a much lower level. Officially, and that is not a lie because this is bureaucracy, and bureaucracy needs to plan and needs to budget for a year ahead. So you can't lie there because that's money and Congress will go after you. The US is interested in reducing its presence in Syria to a single entry point that it can use to do whatever it wants, whenever it wants. But it's also interested in limiting its outlay in the Middle East. It's limiting in shifting its focus to China. That means it needs to bring active involvement in Syria to an end. To do this, they have to declare that Syria is not a terrorist threat anymore. Otherwise, that opens up to grandstanding from other colonial powers and other rabid colonialists inside the US political scheme itself, whether Democrats or Republicans. So they have to discover that the current Syrian government is not terrorist and is not a threat. So that's why they are presenting this welcoming image, the Syrian government. On the other hand, the nature of the US colonial power has certain cadences, meaning the way the US practices colonialism is not happenstance. There are certain impulses of the institution that results in certain traditions. You can see that clearly in Iraq. So what the US is looking to do in Syria is create a colony. What a colony means in the US imperial mind is Iraq. which is not a state, even in the nation state sense. It's an internal war between different conflicting parties that cannot win or lose. And they maintain an ongoing state of struggle over resources and over control that the US mediates. So, what the US would like to do is to create an ecosystem of contained war within a region, within a geographic region, just also like they did in Iraq. So when the US says that it's interested in a nice, peaceful, stable Syria like that rat Barak says, that's what they mean. It's not what the words mean, because that's their behavior. And you follow actions, you don't follow words. So also when the US says that it did not like Israel's interference in Syria, that is not completely true. What they did not like is not Israel's interference in Syria, but the ultimate goal. So Israel is interested in breaking down Syria into statelets that are at war with each other. And some of them in open alliance with Israel, and as a result, at war with the other parts. So they wanted a Druze statelet, they want the Alawi statelet, they want a Kurdish statelet, and they want a few Arab statelets. The US doesn't want that because that means ongoing international crisis. It means unbound Israel, which is not particular to the US liking. It means that crises could happen whenever Netanyahu feels like it because he has whatever happening and whatever court date coming to him. And the US is not the business of babysitting. They're like something like Iraq, where the guys fight each other and then they go to some constitutional court that is bought by the US. And then when the fight gets out of hand, they come to Washington and settle it in there. Or come to the American embassy in the green zone and settle it in there.
Mm.
That's what they are looking for. That's not what Israel is looking for. On the other hand, the US appreciates that Israel is allowing it to create these internal warring parties that are always out of balance, but not completely in open war. So that's why you see them saying, we are angry at Israel. But that's anger like Biden's anger at Netanyahu's massacres in Gaza. An anger that is not real. That is just, well, it's not our responsibility. It's a good cup, bad cup act. What tells you that more is actually the fact that the US went and did that obscene scene in Paris this week. So they brought in France and they came up with a statement that says, well, actually, Israel has interests and it has to be satisfied. And that's why we are going to sponsor some kind of discussion between Israel and the Syrian government. And that's a discussion that will never get anywhere because the Syrian government is saying, well, for anything to happen, Israel has to withdraw from the areas it occupied after the Bashar regime fell. And Israel is not going to do that ever. So it's essentially an attempt to blackmail the Syrian government into something that's not going to do, and they are not coming actually and saying it. All what this is managing instability. On the other hand, also that is saying, well, there is a crisis in Sweida that is not going to dissipate. And just bringing France is unnatural. This week, Trump said that France doesn't matter, flat out. When he went and said, well, the good news is whatever Macron says doesn't matter, literally. So why then bring it into discussion about Syria? Because France presents itself and has presented itself for the last century as the protector of minorities in the Middle East. So it is there to sponsor the Kurds. Or, sorry, the Ujlan cultists in PKK. And what that means is the US is trying to take with the left hand what it gave with the right hand under Turkish pressure, which is PKK has to be completely dissolved. So what the US is trying to do is to create something like Iraq under the pretext of being supportive of not that happening. But don't look at the words, look at the actions.
Can you give me a quick reminder what's going on in Iraq as far as the players?
So right now in Iraq, what you have is not particularly a state. You have the Shia sectarian gangs supported by Iran that are on top. You have the two and a half Kurdish nationalist gangs, and you have various gangs that call themselves Sunnis roving around to find a place to steal. And all of these are fighting over state resources. And meanwhile, a state that exports oil to all over the world cannot supply electricity to Basra. That Saddam state could supply under international sanctions, which is a feat.
Mm. Yes,
All of that money is being stolen. And this didn't happen accidentally. It happened because that's what the US wanted to create. They wanted to create an unstable structure that cannot sustain itself, that cannot be at peace with itself. Nation states, by definition, are not at peace with themselves. Typically, what you do to create artificial peace is you allow one of the components of the nation state to crush the others. Okay? But if you don't allow any of the components to crush the others and create a false mythological national myth, then what happens is ongoing struggle all the time. And this seems to be the preferred mode of government for the new and improved US colonies after the Soviet Union fell down. The same thing is happening in Somalia. That's also another US colony under US sponsorship. They call them in political science parlance failed states. But more accurately, this is the new model of US colonies in the Middle East. So what's happening is now it used to be that the goal of the nation states was to break free of the colonial control. Now the goal of the new model of US colonies is to achieve the old balance of nation states of the Cold War era. And the longer you stay under colonialism, the deeper you get into the will of servitude. So you could see that in Iraq, for example, they allowed the Arab nationalists to crush everyone else during the Cold War. Now what they have is open war. In Syria, managed war, not open war, managed war. In Syria, this is the model. Syria is quite receptive to this model, meaning you can create that very easily because the tools are there. In Somalia, that's exactly the same thing. In Sudan, it's going there. And you would observe that the Sudanese army is a long-term American institution. But the US is not coming out, for example, and actively supporting it. It's allowing it to float in fighting with the RSF, which is actually a product of the corruption of the Sudanese army. After breaking Sudan into two halves, so all what's happening is the new model of US colony in the Middle East is getting people into so miserable state where the dream of the old form of colonialism, the stable nation state, let alone freedom.
Yeah. Manage chaos.
Yeah.
So Israel would like to have the same model, but
No, Israel would like
over the
open
top
war.
chaos.
Israel would like open war.
Yeah.
Difference. Israel would like statelets that are at war with each other. Some of them are in alliance with Israel. Others are not in alliance or out of favor with Israel. And Israel manages its favors between its enemies. Israel, in the end, is a small state with not that much resources. And it can only survive and dominate if all those around it are even smaller and weaker.
Yes.
It's not the US, but the US is the imperial order itself. It has different perspective.
Okay, where does Turkey fit into this? Because
Turkey
yes.
sees Syria as an extension of itself and doesn't want what's happening in Iraq to happen in Syria, because what happened in Iraq actually damaged it. And that is actually the nation state, the Turkish nation state believes that. This is not just Erdogan's faction, this is even the Kemalist faction. So to remind everyone, the Kemalist faction, the CHP, were the ones who rejected the US interference in Iraq in 2001. and 2003. So this is the nation state in Turkey sees this as a threat to it. They are the ones who pressured the US into the position of PKK has to go, because PKK has always been an American project with a lot of European support, no debate. But a lot of the PKK support was American. And Turkey sees this as a nation state, as a mortal threat. They think they are close to getting rid of it, so they'd like to cash in on that. But on the other hand, the Turkish nation state is very timid, very careful. The US knows that. It tells you a lot when you see that the American commissar of Syria is also the American ambassador to Turkey. That's all you need to know.
Okay, I'm gonna rephrase what you said. Turkey's only concern at this moment in the game, for lack of a better word, is we want to crush the PKK. That's what I want out of this. The fact that they're going to turn Syria into another Iraq, a manageable crisis, they don't care about that. Because the
No,
fact,
they care, but there is a list of priorities.
hmm,
So right now, the US had told the Turkey and Israel, you guys play nice with each other. So they went and had a deconfliction agreement. And the deconfliction agreement essentially says that officially that Israel has no business above the north of Homs and Turkey has no business south of Homs.
hmm.
Now, Israel does not honor this agreement and regularly attacks north of Homs and interferes heavily north of Homs. Turkey, on the other hand, mostly accepts that. And when it interferes south of Homs, it's political, it's not military, through military means. The first priority for Turkey in Syria right now is to wind down the PKK. Winding down the PKK actually means winding down the rebellion in Sweida, because the rebellion in Sweida started because of a strategic calculation. So the strategic calculation of the Syrian state was, we need to get rid of the PKK. If we manage to do this, which is accepted by the US because of Turkish pressure, then the rebellion in Sweida will die down on its own. This is a poor region that needs state resources. Leave it hanging and will dry on its own. Now, the Israelis advised their clients in Sweida, there is a client in Sweida, to go first, because if they stay to the end, they will just wither and die. So he advised them to go first and create a crisis first and force their case first, because that would strengthen the case of the PKK. And that would mean that both of them have a better chance to survive, even though it will damage them more, their Druzi clients. Okay. So that's why Sweida came first. Now, so as I was saying, because Turkey has a priority of getting rid of the PKK, that means it has a priority in not allowing this project to go forward. Okay, because the two things are quite related. But even then, this is a timid nation state that is very careful. So that's why it keeps its interference in Syria primarily related to PKK. Okay. Now, it is true that Turkey has done something in response to this, which is supply military hardware to Turkey this week, to Syria this week. This is not direct action against Israel, but it's an assertion of, well, we don't like what's happening and we'll try to do something about it.
Complicated.
Well, the political struggle is complicated, and nation states have many interests and limited resources. And that means they have to make priorities and they have to make balances that are at times actually contradictory.
Mm.
That applies to everyone. And actually, the theory of the international relations says that the interests of states are function of the resources. So you can actually create endless lists of interests and things you want to have and keep and get, and etc. But actually, what you act on is wherever your resources end. So
Make,
the list of interests and goals and thefts, for example, that the US would like to achieve are different than those that Israel want to achieve because the resources are different.
makes sense.
Yeah,
That's all the questions I had.
thank you. I think we have covered, a reasonable part of the picture. We may need to cover it again in coming weeks, but as events develop, we'll keep following.
I agree. Okay. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you.
Masalam.
Okay.